I stand 4 feet 10 inches above the wrestling mat. I ought to stand 4 feet 11 inches, but the spongy material robs me of another inch. A low dosage antidepressant and 10 milligrams of Ritalin course through my 13-year-old veins. I'm wearing a black wrestling singlet emblazoned with a big-horned ram. A boy is across from me in his own jersey, one with a cartoon devil brandishing a pitchfork. The bright red illuminates his frame, and I can't help but notice the bulge of his crotch. I'm grateful my singlet's dark contours obscures my own. I was always eager to beat someone, anyone, in single combat, but fighting was off limits to me. There was my school's zero-tolerance policy, which sent both parties home for a mandatory 3-day suspension, no matter who started it. There was also a tragic lack of people I realistically could fight. I stood at least 4 inches below everyone else I knew, so suppressing my daily urge to hit people in the cafeteria was really a matter of survival instinct. But this scrawny kid in the red singlet, I think I can take him. We shake hands and make eye contact. His eyes are bluer than mine. His hair is blonder. And the whistle blows. I want to seize the back of his knee and pitch him to the side, cover his chest with mine and pin his shoulders to the mat. But his arms seem twice as long as mine. He's got my knee and I try to pull away, but he shoots for my other knee and I go down. I scramble for a reversal, arch my back, thrust my thighs into the air, but I feel my shoulder blades press deep into the mat and the referee's hand passes into view once, twice, 3 times. The whistle blows again and the boy releases me and leaps up. His fist is pumping in triumph. The referee lifts his arm into the air and the boy looks at me again. I'm supposed to shake his hand. But my face is hot and I can already feel the tears coming. I turn and slink away, and barely a moment passes before I feel a rough hand on my neck. It's my coach. His hot breath growls in my ear. You shake that kid's hand, or God help me, I will beat the shit out of you. From somewhere in the bleachers, I can feel my dad watching. I shake my vanquisher's hand in a feeble grip, hurry off to the bathroom, and the tears arrive. I had every reason to cry. But as early as the 3rd grade, I didn't need a reason to lapse into a torrent of inexplicable tears. I'd wandered hallways and remote corners where I sobbed alone, waiting for it to pass. My parents put their upper-middle-class resources to work and hired a therapist. Outmatched by my gushing emotions, he surrendered the field to someone actually licensed to prescribe medication, and I saw a psychiatrist twice a month. I got the fashionable diagnosis of ADD, with a side order of childhood depression. Every morning before school, I'd find a brown bag lunch and 2 pills on the kitchen counter. I imagined them dissolving in my stomach acid, spreading dark embarrassment through my blood like food coloring in a glass of water. I felt surpassed by everyone. By boys at my school, strong and tall and sprouting hair in mature places. By the girls, who often surpassed me in height before the boys did. By my 2 brothers, who both excelled at team sports. I never wanted to be on a team. And teams didn't want me because my temper made me impossible to be around. I was angry at everything, every day, all the time. I'd rip branches from trees and bushes and snap them into twigs. The smallest verbal slights turned me into a furnace of clenched teeth and tears. Teachers and other kids watched me in stunned silence, astonished to see such fury pulsing from the small area I occupied in space. I'd kick bathroom stall doors and punch paper towel dispensers. There wasn't a bathroom in the school district that survived my wrath. I felt like an unstable reactor. If I didn't find some cooling agent, I'd go into meltdown. The temper in the pills convinced me there was something wrong with me, and I looked for every opportunity to prove that there was not. If it wasn't for a nondescript flyer in the cafeteria announcing tryouts for the wrestling team, I might have gone full Chernobyl. At the family dinner table one night, I said, I tried out for the wrestling team today. If this was a sitcom, a fork would have clattered in stunned reply. I, the middle child, had actually volunteered for a sport after years avoiding and resenting those of my dad's choosing. Practice was every day after school for 2 hours. Every day we learned a new move. My favorite was the fireman's carry, a simple arm and leg takedown I used to slam my opponent onto the mat from full height. We ran sprints, did push-ups, sit-ups, burpees, jumping jacks. I exercised more in a single week than I'd done my whole life. Contoured calf muscles appeared on my legs where none had before. Boys in the locker room clandestinely examined each other's stomachs, vying for position in the unspoken race of who would be the first to develop a six-pack. It wasn't me. I trained for a month before my first match, but the boy in the red singlet pinned me in 30 seconds. And if it wasn't for my coach literally strong-arming me into shaking his hand, my father would have likely done it for him. Dad understood my brother's athletic endeavors, but wrestling was a more nebulous sport for his more nebulous son. Nevertheless, he bought me all the gear I could ask for. The pro-level shoes, the knee pads, even the expensive headgear. Although every time he swiped his credit card at Sports Chalet, I knew he always wanted me to be a part of a team. But I wanted to share my triumphs with no one. Wrestling was mine, and it became the way to quench the reactor inside me. It was another skill I added to a handful of exclusives, including reading Michael Crichton novels and having a very precocious vocabulary. My math abilities were worth a C- at best, and it would be years before a girl ever paid any real attention to me. But I could go the full length of a wrestling match and emerge with my own wrist raised in victory. During those 6 minutes, my anger vanished. The reactor cooled, and my inadequacies, imaginary or otherwise, stopped mattering. There was only the pain of fully engaged muscles, the scrape of headgear, and the sound of my teeth digging into the hard rubber mouthguard. After packing on a few more pounds, I joined the ranks of my high school's team. As the school's winningest program by a large margin, wrestling enjoyed the most funding of any sport. While the football team trained in a dingy weight room built in the 60s, we had our own gym, constructed with $1 million of charitable funds from a wealthy alumnus. I stepped into the gym under walls covered in emerald green championship pennants, fringed with gold tassels dating back to the year my dad graduated from the same school. I was a Poway wrestler. I made the freshman team and practiced under the school's legendary coach, Brandstetter. He was 50 years old and sounded like he consumed a daily breakfast of cigarettes and whiskey. We freshmen, some with aspirations to make the varsity team, revered him. During every practice, Coach became a more fatherly father figure than our own fathers. I approached wrestling with as much aggression as I did everything else. I drilled hard. I breathed in the acrid sweat of the weight room and bench pressed until my arms trembled under the barbell. I lived it all. I was open to ideas and moves and new chances to express what I could do. But there were always better wrestlers, boys in my weight class with wiry frames and vascular limbs. The kid in my weight class I wanted to beat the most was named Kirk. One of 3 triplet brothers, he was the runt of the litter. While his siblings stood over 6 feet tall and had impressive muscles and even more impressive prom dates, Kirk weighed just over 100 pounds and stood about 5'3". His arms and legs were sinewy, and his torso was muscular, as if one of his twin brothers lived inside of him, struggling to break through his skin. He directed whatever rage he had squarely at me, bullying and harassing me constantly. He'd try out complicated and painful holds on me, and it was my turn to practice on him. Instead of allowing me to execute the move, he'd plant his feet and resist, then reverse and take me down when Coach wasn't looking. I didn't know how to confront him. I was afraid of his huge brothers and their heavyweight friends, those foul-mouthed 17 and 18-year-olds with cauliflower ears and meager grade point averages. Reporting him to Coach wasn't an option. All he'd suggest was I train harder and beat him on the mat where it counted. But I couldn't. He was naturally gifted and effortlessly dominated the weight class. It felt incredibly unfair. I trained hard to just be okay at wrestling, but he didn't even need to try. Wrestling was my cooling rod. It was my reactor's safety protocol, and it was a system that had worked for 3 years. Instead of radiating rage, I focused it into every match and drill. Instead of kicking bathroom stall doors, I wrestled. Instead of screaming at my brother or arguing with my dad, I wrestled. And instead of huddling under the bleachers in yet another tearful episode, I fucking wrestled. And this sociopath was trying to take it all away from me. The other wrestlers in my weight class all had the same suggestion. You should kick his ass, dude. I don't know if they actually cared about my dilemma or if they just wanted to see a good fight. One day after particularly grueling practice, we headed to the showers, sweaty and stinky. Self-conscious about my body and avoiding eye contact with everyone, I kept my shower quick. With soap in my eyes, I didn't see him coming. Then my vision cleared, and there Kirk was, holding his dick and pissing on me. The reactor went critical. I threw my hardest punch right at his jaw. I cut my hand on his incisor, and my knuckle bone fractured. He staggered back under the running water, and other boys in the locker room shouted and shrieked. He came at me and swung, and I dodged him, and he went sprawling naked against the shower wall. I felt hands on my shoulders, and someone pulled me away. Two big guys pulled Kirk away too, and he screamed, "Fuck you!" again and again through bloody teeth. My legs trembled as I escaped the chaos. I didn't bother to dry off, pulling on my clothes as fast as I could. I ran, my body soaked in soap, still in my hair, sprinting into the school, my backpack flopping over my shoulder. I went straight to the nurse's office, knowing full well what would happen when I got there. She took one look at my swollen, bleeding hand and knew immediately. But I wanted her to know. I wanted everyone to know. I sat in the administrative office with a bag of ice in my hand. An overweight security officer stood guard over me as if I would suddenly smash the secretary's candy jar. I could see my dad in his herringbone blazer through a pane of security glass as he talked to the principal. At this same school some 30 years ago, Dad got into his own fight. I had heard the story. He was playing tennis when a boy walked across the court and disrupted his game. After the kid refused to move, Dad lobbed the ball in the air and delivered a 140-mile-an-hour serve right at his head. The story always felt inconsistent with his long-time doctrine to his three sons. You're allowed to start fights. You're not allowed to start fights, but you can finish them. I felt like I'd finished something. And the only reason why I didn't have a grin on my face while waiting for my inevitable 3-day suspension was because sitting across from me, awaiting the same punishment, was Kirk. He glared at me in silent rage, his jaw swollen and his knees shaking. He kind of looked like he needed to pee. My dad marched me to his waiting car. He didn't seem upset and listened calmly when I told him the whole story. He asked me to demonstrate how I formed my fist before I threw a punch, as if proof of masculinity was found somewhere in the latticework of properly closed fingers. Unaware that there was even a wrong way to do it, I showed him. And with unmistakable pride on his face, he drove me home. After my suspension ended, I wrestled for the remainder of the year. But before the next season started, I felt like I didn't need it anymore. I learned enough from every practice, every win, and especially every loss. I worked in my high school newspaper, an activity which required no physical violence of any kind to be good at. Relying on journalism to cool the reactor instead of violence felt like progress. The last time I needed a wrestling match was almost 20 years ago, but I've never ruled out the possibility of a comeback. Thank you.
Brent Hannify!